Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. Is it time to advance your career into a new role? My name is Eric Lee. I'm with the Association of Corporate Counsel. Finally, the views expressed during this program belong solely to the panelists and do not reflect the views of the Association of Corporate Counsel or the entities for whom the panelists are employed. And now I'll turn it over to Patricia Trudeau, Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer with the Association of Corporate Counsel. Patricia?
Thank you so much, Eric. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you joining us today for this great discussion. We have a really knowledgeable panel and are so very happy that everybody was able to join us today. We want to move forward with really an engaging discussion about how you know when it's time to advance your career and what those next steps should look like. What I would like to do is just take a moment to introduce our three speakers on our panel today. Susan Duarte is an experienced senior corporate counsel and business partner who has represented Fortune 100 companies for over 20 years. She focuses her practice on consumer protection issues, including privacy, advertising, and consumer finance. Susan is passionate about delivering innovative products and services to the market. To that end, she negotiates agreements, counsels on regulatory compliance, and advocates before state and federal regulators to ensure her clients can deliver products and services that work to make lives better. In addition, Susan handles complex litigation and investigations with the goal of resolving the matter in a way that best protects her clients' investigations with the goal of, and I apologize, her client's best interest. Susan graduated from the Columbus School of Law with a specialty degree from the Communications Law Institute. Susan has worked at VeriSign, T-Mobile, and Mintz Levin, and is currently looking for her next amazing opportunity. Welcome, Susan, and thank you for joining us. Douglas Haas was appointed Chief Legal and Compliance Officer and Secretary effective January 1st of 2022. He's joined Kimball Electronics in August of 2020 as the Associate General Counsel and Assistant Secretary. He has more than 25 years of legal, management, and operations experience centered on technology-intensive telecommunication companies and electronics manufacturers. Prior to Kimball Electronics, Mr. Haas served as General Counsel and Secretary of Lifeway Foods, a dairy company listed on NASDAQ from 2016 through 2020, where he received First Chair's prestigious Top General Counsel Award in 2019. He was also recognized as one of Illinois' top 40 under 40 attorneys by Chicago Daily Law Bulletin and Chicago Lawyer, and is a past chair of the Association of Corporate Counsel's Employment and Labor Law Network, a group of nearly 7,000 labor and employment attorneys worldwide. Mr. Haas holds a JD magna cum laude from Indiana University Morris School of Law in Bloomington, Indiana. Welcome, Doug. We're very happy to have you with us today. Billy Moliere is a New York-based district president with Robert Half, focused on the company's legal practice group. She oversees operations for several branches in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast regions of the United States. Moliere is also has an expertise in diversity and inclusion as a lead for Robert Half. She joined the Chicago office of Robert Half as an account executive in 2006 and has held several leading positions, including division director, branch manager, and regional vice president. She was promoted in her current role in 2013 and is widely considered an expert on employment trends in the legal field, providing skilled and practiced guidance to clients and candidates. She's also received company recognition and awards for her leadership skills. Moliere is an attorney with more than 10 years of experience practicing law and holds a JD from Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Welcome, Billy. So thank you, everybody, as I said, for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started with kind of that very basic question of how do you know when it is time to make your next career move, and what should you consider in doing that? Doug, you want to go ahead and get us started with that?
Sure. Everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, but I think the time to make your next career move as an in-house lawyer is, it typically boils down to a couple of things. If you've reached a plateau in your current role, if you've outgrown the opportunities that are available to you within your current organization, but also think about, lack of challenge. That was always a big one for me. Do I feel like I'm kind of stretching my capabilities a little bit? Job satisfaction, work-life balance, compensation, changes that you want to get in industry or practice area. Those are all considerations in any in-house job, like they are with any. And always I would say whenever you consider a move, it's important to take that time to sit back and kind of evaluate your skills, your experience, and your goals to determine the type of role that's going to be the best fit for you when you're ready to make that move. So that when you take that step, that next step is a logical one.
That definitely makes sense. Susan, what are your thoughts?
I share a lot of the same perspectives that Doug just articulated. I do think, it's very important to see if you can advance where you are. Sometimes it's okay to admit that maybe it's just not the best fit for you, and that maybe you want to be doing something different. I think some of the things to consider that we've already talked about a bit is, what do you want to do in 5 years? Maybe thinking about skills that you don't have that you might want to add to your resume. So example would be M&A type work or transactional work if you're interested in being a general counsel. Or maybe you don't want to be in the legal department, you'd rather be on the business side. Just kind of thinking about what the next job could do to sort of help you get to your ultimate landing spot, or your next job might be your landing spot.
Great, thank you. Billy, from the recruiting perspective?
Yeah, I definitely echo all the sentiments above. If I could add on, I would just say, and this is connected to some of the statements, but when there's a lack of opportunity for advancement, I certainly think you should seek out potential opportunities internally, maybe even before you decide to make a move, if you otherwise, like or love your organization. But I think if there's nothing that could advance your career, maybe the best move is for you to look externally. The other things I would just mention are really just personal. I always say it's good to be able to love or at least like your job enough that you can wake up without an alarm clock. I mean, that may just be not the reality, but when you need the alarm clock and you have to snooze several times because you dread going to work, there's something going on. I mean, obviously, best case would be speak to, internally, probably your direct manager on why that's the case. And if there's opportunities to improve your environment. But again, if it's a circumstance where it's toxic or you have a relationship with the person you report to or the teams you work with, you have to decide whether or not that's, a time that you need to think about making a move externally as well. So I think some of those things are things you look at. And I would just say the last thing, things can change. I think what we know is consistent now is things change all the time. You feel more motivated when you feel like you're valued and when you're recognized the way you want to be recognized, and when you're successful helping the business of the practice of law in your environment and included. And if you start losing that sense, then your work is going to be diminished as well. And I think you have to look within and see what you can do internally. But again, if those things don't change, you don't want to be a problem for the organization as well. And it may be a time for you to look at something that might be a better match for you.
Great points. We don't love every day that we get up to go to work, but you really do want to at least still be motivated and excited and challenged kind of day to day in what you're doing. And if you're not, if nothing else, I think for a lot of people, COVID helped really kind of put a lot of that more in perspective for individuals. Mm-hmm. So that it's certainly your mental health is absolutely the most important thing for you to be effective, both at work as well as in anything else that you're doing. Billy, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from your perspective of what the job market looks like now for in-house counsel?
Yeah, I know. And, there's a lot of, I think, we can call it contradictory, perspectives, with varying perspectives. You hear a lot about the job market and the economy, and there's some fear, and, it is very fluid, right? Because if you watch kind of news outlets, you kind of don't know what's happening any day. But I will tell you from our perspective, there's still a lot of demand for in-house counsel, particularly in the commercial contract space, but in a lot of other spaces as well. And so our, job request pipeline is as robust as it has been in many areas. And so I don't see a slowdown in hiring. I think it's where there's hiring and how the hiring is taking place. And then probably the levels, right? Are there as many really senior level roles today? We are seeing some, but maybe not as many. But there's a healthy amount of kind of that mid-level role and even entry-level roles. And, Doug probably can attest to this as well himself. And so we're quite busy in that space. And so I think from a job seeker perspective, it's still a candidate market, particularly if you have the right skill sets. If I could just provide a few statistics, we know unemployment today is about 3.5%, still near a historic low. Unemployment for lawyers, so that crosses in-house and law firms, but it's less than 1%. And we certainly feel that pain when we get job requests, right? And so in a number of cases, our candidates with the skill sets that are in demand, commercial contracts, IP, other transactional areas, commercial litigation, have multiple and competing offers as well. And so, I think that's good news for a job seeker, but obviously I would also just caution that job hiring managers are looking for the right talent. And so there's an equal amount of making sure you're vetting and you're getting the right person to fill jobs today, because every seat is even more important today. So I'm sure, Doug, you might echo that sentiment. So.
Yeah, I agree. It obviously depends on your on the industry that you're in. My sense is certainly in the technology manufacturing, there's demand. We're adding to our team, and have been, and I know that other of our peers are doing the same. In other growing spaces, certainly there's always demand in finance for people with that background, technology, healthcare, energy, those sessions or those segments. And I think that probably the best advice that I got before I came in-house, I started my career in-house with a federal agency and then went back to the law firm world and then went back in-house. Probably the best advice that I got from anyone in-house was that first in-house job is really hard to get. It's really hard to break in, and sometimes there are transitions back and forth. Where you start off in-house, and that was my my perspective. I started off in-house. I kind of got to that point where I felt like I've topped out of what I can do here in this office and with this organization, with this agency. And I went, I was too junior really to have any real skills, I guess, to offer. And so I went to a firm and got those and was able to build skills that then led to that next in-house role. And then led to the next one. So I think don't be afraid to think outside the box a little bit. Look for where you're interested and where you can. I think Susan, you said, but where else can you build skills? Is it if you have a real interest in privacy, can you go get that certification? If you have always been intrigued by labor and employment, that's something that makes you valuable to just about any employer and just about any industry. So think about how can you round out those skills and present that, because it is, as Billy said, it's a competitive market. It is there are going to be a lot of people, and so you have to be willing to stand out and put your best foot forward. And sometimes I see the question in the chat is do you accept less money for a greater opportunity? And I think the answer is yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll share with everybody who's attending. I left a general counsel role to an assistant or associate general counsel role, deputy general counsel role. And that might be seen as maybe as a step backwards, but the opportunity at Kimball to go from a Russell 3000 company to a Russell 2000 company in the technology manufacturing industry that I had a background in before becoming a lawyer was worth that. In the short term, I'm going to make less, but I'm going to have an opportunity to learn. I'm going to have an opportunity, at some point to move up back into a chief legal officer role where I am now. And so I think you have to weigh that. There's lots of personal considerations that go into it. But I think there's no bad time to take the right role, and if that means accepting a little less money in the short run for some long-term gain. go for it.
Well, if I could just jump in there, Patricia, I mean, I think that's spot on, Doug. We always say your career is a marathon, not a sprint, and they're chapters. And so if you can do something to advance skills to position yourself to be in a better spot 3-5 years down the road, why wouldn't you do that? And so I think you got to be your own best advocate for what that looks like, but it could mean a switch in a different direction. Might not be linear, and it may mean a step away from the pay that you currently have to make much more down the road. And is pay always the main thing? I mean, I know a lot of times it is, but it's not necessarily when you're looking down the end of the road, you know, as you walk through this marathon, which is our career. So I was just going to add just a few more stats. So Patricia, if you're okay with that, in terms of just the job market, we released a survey recently that indicated that 54% of managers in the legal field are hiring for vacated roles just for a number of reasons. But again, doesn't mean it's going to be an easy hire, to Doug's point, right? There's a lot of competition out there, but there are roles that are vacated that need to be filled. 44% are hiring for new roles as well, and 97% are facing challenges in terms of the skills you need today for particular roles. A lot of those are new skills that nobody really may have, right? Just based on how technology is changing the work we do today. And so there is a bit of a skills gap, and you got to look at what you need to do to find the right talent.
Absolutely. Some great points. Susan, what do you think are the best conditions where you would consider accepting less money for that greater opportunity? Something that would fall within that area that would make sense where I can't pass this up.
I think there's a couple of things. One would be, like as Doug was saying, you're getting great skills, but I think sometimes you're getting a really great mentor in an employer. So someone who can really help you grow and develop. I think another area would be if you know the company is growing. So you know that the company is probably going to either make it big or break into something else, sort of a bet, but you know you're going to advance and be a part of something larger. So it's another consideration. And then sometimes you may just, you may want to get some government experience, especially if you're around here in the DC area, just to round out your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. So as I'm taking a look at a lot of the questions that are coming in, and I think Doug may have mentioned this earlier, and I'll kind of put this out to all of you about dealing with changing practice areas. How do you know, when it makes the most sense to do that? And if you want to change fields entirely, taking an entry-level position probably makes the most sense, but what do you look at when you're looking for these new fields? And you never typically do see these entry-level attorney positions listed.
I can tackle a little bit of that. I don't know that I would accept the premise of to change practice areas, you got to go to an entry-level position. I think in a maybe in a very large, legal department, maybe that's, you're pigeonholed into, I'm the the Eastern United States, contract manager for whatever, and you feel very pigeonholed. And yeah, maybe then you go from that very pigeonholed position to an entry-level position. But I think that's somewhat unique. I think most legal departments, that are not, the size of law firms, are more generalist. And so I don't think that it's necessarily looking for an entry-level position, but maybe a mid-level position in a different industry, or in a what tends to be generalist roles, but that have different focuses. So you go from a manufacturing company to something that's adjacent to manufacturing. Maybe you go to a technology company or an infrastructure company. You go from an energy company to a manufacturer. Something that allows you then to get that experience, to learn a new field, but doesn't require you to go from a mid-level position to try to find an entry-level position, because I think that's going to be really hard to do. There aren't a lot of them posted, and you're probably ridiculously overqualified for most of them. It's going to be really hard to get it. The first question I'm going to think of when I see that application is, geez, what's going on?
What's going on?
Why are you applying for this role? And that's that's it's going to be something that maybe you can get around that with a cover letter or an explanation of some type. But I think you're better off looking for a role at your level, just in, with a different mix, a different departmental mix.
I think
Well-
too, you can also like partner with others in your own department to gain those skills. So I've often asked colleagues, hey, can I shadow you on this project? Or I know we're working on this initiative. I've this me on this, you're this me on that, but can we like talk about it a little bit more? Will you share the research from outside counsel? And that's how I've developed a lot of skills along the way.
I'd also just mention, just try sell your transferable skills as well. And just refrain from having one resume. Just adapt your resume if you see a role that you want, so that it actually speaks to your ability to stretch your skills into that role that you're looking to apply for. So I agree, you don't necessarily have to step back to an entry-level role, but you will need to showcase the alignment of your skills to a role that may not necessarily be in your wheelhouse, and how that hiring manager can see you fitting into that role without a lot of difficulty. But there's an opportunity to do that.
Great point. So there definitely are several questions here in relation to hybrid and how working as a new to in-house, how that really works, and kind of that transition, but also better understanding, transition to a more hybrid business than a legal role. What are you guys seeing as far as, from a hybrid standpoint, how all of that has changed in the way legal work is now being done and what is available?
I think it probably depends on the company. With me, I'm about 2 hours away from our corporate headquarters. The other attorneys in my department are no closer than, there's one about 2 hours away, but she's about as close as it gets. I've got, one across the country, and, one across the globe, halfway around the world from me. But we're a global company. So, that's pretty typical. Most of my day is spent talking to people who are not where I am, who are in Europe or Asia or somewhere else. And so the hybrid model came pretty easy. But I know other companies, and and when I was in the job market, I interviewed with companies that were very much, we're very locally focused. Everyone's here. Everybody's here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, even though it's COVID times or before, and that hasn't really changed. We still have that expectation that somebody's here every day. So it really depends on the company culture and kind of how, I think, really what their operations look like. It's just going to vary. And it's a good question to ask and to know up front, because I know there were a couple of positions that I looked at where I said, this just isn't for me. I'm not going to be in a suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday in the office. It just doesn't work with my life. I've got young kids, and that's just not how it works. And so I was looking for a role where, in part I could do something like that. So, something to consider as beyond just comp and title is what kind of, what kind of life are you walking into?
Yeah, the work model. I can tell you, we are seeing much more of a shift away from 100% remote, and flipping, even when you talk about hybrid, to maybe a 3 and 2, and in some cases 4 and 1 in office. But still some flexibility. But there's definitely a move to more in-office work based on what we're seeing. But, you just have to Doug's point, you've got to look at the opportunity and really ask the question about what's your work model, so you understand the culture you're walking into. But it's a little bit different today. And I would say holistically, the shift, just based on what we're seeing on my end, more of a shift to in-office work.
I think like one of the questions I'm seeing too is it problematic when you're a new attorney to be working remotely? I think it just depends on your personality, and everybody says, lawyers say it depends, and it's true, but I was working remotely before remotely was even like fashionable, because my husband's a foreign service officer. So we lived around the world, and I was lucky enough to work. And one of the things I realized was I just really needed to invest my time in getting to know people. So I built a lot of relationships just over IM, or calling them or getting to know them. And that seemed to really help. And then if I needed mentoring, we would just hop on a call and we'd share screens and go over things. Yes, I think it's important to be in the same room with other people sometimes. So if you can find that hybrid, but I don't think it's going to necessarily hinder you in your career if you don't let it.
Very true. Can you tell me, panelists, have you seen that one of our questions was, do you feel that you need to move organizations in order to be able to move up from a position perspective, to take on those new responsibilities and to be seen differently? Do you have to change organizations to do that? Doug, you want to start with that?
I don't think so. I think it really depends on the organization. In some cases, yeah, that may be, I think I said at the outset, that depends on that's part of the evaluation you have to make when you're thinking about, do you go take a new role, is what are my prospects here? I haven't had that happen as a lawyer, but part of the reason I'm a lawyer today is I was a COO of a company where the CEO was my age and he was not interested in retiring or going anywhere. I had nowhere to go. I wasn't going to move up in the business. I'd been there 9 years, and it was time to do something else. As fulfilling as that was, I needed to do something else in my career. So in that case, I had to move out, but in other places I haven't. But it really depends on your individual situation.
And from listening to all of you, it definitely seems as though it is, and granted, company culture certainly does play a large part in as we're in this new hybrid environment. But it does seem that from a legal perspective, you absolutely can do it hybrid. It's not something where we're feeling like you have to be in the office. And we've definitely seen, even though, as Billy is saying, it sounds like we're sort of going back, they're moving back to trying to get everybody back more. But it does seem like this is something, even if you are newer to the profession, where you certainly can still be successful in a hybrid environment. Would you guys agree with that?
I would just say also on that, and I'll definitely defer, right? Because I'm not actually working myself in a legal environment. So my, feedback is based on making placements in legal environments and what we know about it. That also probably depends on the type of environment. If there's an environment that just requires in-office mentoring and training, then that could be problematic for new persons. But it just really depends on the environment. I think the smart employers make in-office work purposeful, and they make work not a destination, but a resource for mentoring, training, other opportunities. And so maybe you do need more time if you're newer, just to connect in a way that you otherwise wouldn't early on. But that certainly wouldn't be the case after, you've developed the skills and the connections that you might need to be successful in the role. So my answer to that would be depends, but obviously, there could be different perspectives.
Susan or Doug, any additional thoughts on that?
I couldn't have said it any better.
I think one thing that's
knocked that one out of the park, Billy.
High five on that, Doug.
I'll share a quick story in case this helps anyone. I thought that once the pandemic sort of had the restrictions had lifted, it would be beneficial to go in the office. And so I was going into the office and I was like, this will be great, because I started in the pandemic and then I was on Zoom all day. Or WebEx. So I don't know that it's necessarily like 100% necessary. Like it's good if you're going in, if there's other people there, but or maybe, you just need a break from the house, but I wouldn't necessarily rule out, working remotely.
Yeah, I think the key is purposeful in-office activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely quite a lot of questions coming in about going from in-house counsel to the business side. And if there's a good opportunity, have you seen that transition happen successfully? And I know there was also a question about having transferable skills to HR. Is there a way that it can be demonstrated that it's acceptable to HR professionals? So I guess really taking a look at how have you guys seen, if you've seen that, being able to take those skills on the legal side and transferring them to the business side, I guess, whether it's HR or another area from a strategic perspective. Have you seen it being successful, and how do you go about doing that?
I've seen it be successful, not in the HR context, but I've had colleagues that have moved into the strategy side or moved into C-suite positions. A lot of times I see lawyers going into chief operating officer roles. I think, my mom always used to say, well, if you have a law degree, you can do anything, Susan. So I think that's true. You make the right connections and you spend time with them, and you're a good fit. I think they're, would be happy to have you in their organization. Again, that's probably an area where you may have to take a pay cut, and you need to tell them that you're willing to do that to move into that organization. I don't know if that's true or false, but that would be my sense.
And if I could just jump in here, I think in some cases it's healthy to take business related roles to just make you more well-rounded depending on where you're looking to take your career. And so it can be helpful. The one thing I would say about this though is, so you look at someone like me, I practiced law for 10 years, but I've been in, leadership, in talent solutions, consulting, and in staffing operations for 17. I'm probably not going back to the traditional practice. So it depends, right? So if you're in an organization and you are navigating your career, you want more business experience and you're getting involved in that piece of it, but you're going back to practice in some facet, that's a little bit different than I'm changing my career completely to a legal adjacent or non-legal role. And do I want to come back after 15 years? I think that may be more challenging. So you just have to think about, again, the marathon versus the sprint. Where are you taking your career? Is this something to bolster skill sets, right? To make you more well-rounded, and it's a stint of time that you do it? Or are you changing your career holistically, to do something alternative, which is great as well, by the way. So.
And seek it out. I can't remember which one of you mentioned, I think maybe Susan, about having a mentor, and maybe that if you're, for me, it's probably the CEO and the board. But as a more junior attorney, maybe it's your supervisor. Law, legal departments don't do as good of a job of this as finance departments do. So CFOs, are always thinking about, well, I've got a great director of FP&A. How do I get them operational plant controller experience? And then we need to get them over to, to M&A, and we need to get them into a treasury role. And then I need to have them be a controller, so someday they can be a CFO. And so they're always thinking about, how do I rotate my people around in these different finance areas? And I don't think that we do enough of that. Partly it's size of legal departments, but I think that, people in my chair in particular can do more to try to get people more well-rounded and say, all right, you've been here for a couple of years. How do I get you some legal operations experience? And hey, can I get you into more of an employment focused role? Or if we've got litigation, can I get you into litigation? Can I farm you out the other way? Can I get you to a law firm? Can I second you to a law firm and have a law firm send somebody here, to get you experience? I saw a question, about somebody's, I've been in the in-house for a short period of time, and I feel like I'm missing some skills. Well, maybe that's a discussion to have. And some of that, if it's not happening at your organization, don't be afraid to have those discussions with your mentor and to say, look, I want to serve on boards. I want to get experience in employment law. I want to be able to be exposed to the operations side. Can I do that? Can I go? And it might be as simple as maybe you stay in your same role, but instead of sitting in the headquarters in the legal department, you say, hey, I'm going to go to our plant or our facility here. And I know I'm still going to be doing some of the same work, but then I'm interfacing with different people. I can build relationships there, and maybe I see a business role that makes sense for me. Maybe I just get to know those people in that part of the operation in a different way than I do from where I'm sitting today. So to think outside of the box and speak up. Billy's right. It's your career. It's a marathon. Shape it, make it be the career you want it to be. And because no one else is going to do that for you. It's going to be you're going to do it, or everyone, no one's going to help you, or necessarily recognize that that's what you really wanted secretly.
So if you don't have somebody advocating for you, and you are looking to continue your development, or maybe you're not even sure what makes sense for that next step. What do you think about, do you agree, and have you worked with professional or career coaches? Are there networks or memberships? Obviously, being a member with ACC, you certainly have different opportunities with the networks and chapters. What have you seen that has worked, and things that you could suggest to others that they should be involved in? Because you really want to work on developing those networks now, not just when you need them, because you're going to obviously be able to derive more benefit from them longer term.
I mean, I can jump in. There's nothing more valuable than networking. I all the time, right? And I agree. ACC is a valuable network. There are a number of others. There's networking. You can join groups on LinkedIn. I would say join special interest affinity groups. The networking doesn't just have to be legal. It can be, you'd be surprised how many legal professionals you meet in your community and doing special interest work that are just aligned with what your interests in life are. You get to know people in a different way, and literally you could land your next job that way. And so I would never discount that. You also can network through partnering, and this isn't a Robert Half plug, with any other professional talent solutions organization. Literally, you can get job advice and you can get connected to people who just know people. Because, someone like me, I've been doing this for 17 years and I practice law. And I don't place every person we meet, but I know a lot of people, and I've got friends who do this also, and we talk. And so I would just say, from a networking perspective, there's probably nothing more valuable when you're looking for a job than the networking piece. And to go back to what I think we've all been saying, you've got to own that piece yourself and do it all the time, everywhere. But there's so many, there are bar associations, you still stay connected to that. There are other meetups, any special interest, the ACC, the MCCA. You can Google any number. Actually, before this, I just Googled, if I'm looking for an in-house legal job, where can I network? Like, there's a list, tons of them. So not that I'm suggesting you go do that now, but you could, and that would be helpful as well.
I think too, to the person who had said, what do you do about working with legal search firms? When they're unresponsive, they make me do questionnaires. Then they go MIA. Understand they're doing,
that's a good one.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these. And so the best, I got some, I've struggled with that too. I get that. Our Kimball Electronics recently hired a new CEO, and he had some, I don't remember how this came up, but in one of the discussions, he had talked about how his journey. Now, granted, CEO, not lawyer, but it's the same kind of thing. And he said the light bulb went off for him when he stopped being passive and really started cultivating relationships with the individuals at these search firms and proactively reaching out to them and talking about his skills and not just waiting for something to be posted online. He said it really transformed the opportunities he was getting, and how the kinds of opportunities and the kinds of responses when he was much more proactive instead of just reacting to what he found. And that's how he found his role before that one. That's how he landed the role at Kimball, was having a relationship with the recruiter that we happened to hire. One of his partners was like, hey, I know Rick's this is a really great candidate, just came on the market. I've been talking with him for a long time. I think he might be great for your search. Now he's our CEO, and he was great. He's awesome. But I thought it was a really good advice.
Well, I will say, just speaking from one of those firms, right? You change the priority when you're not passive. When you're passive, that's a term that's used internally. This is a passive candidate. And so that person's not necessarily interested. And if you have a urgent search, you're probably not sending the passive candidate. If you are active, then to Doug's point, you have a different relationship and you're actually a different priority for the recruiter. So I would just share that from an internal perspective. It's spot on, Doug.
I was thinking too, like, one of the things that I've noticed is that if you're networking with other people and they're telling you about recruiters, and you call up the recruiter and say, Jean recommended you. It sort of helps. It seems like they're, I don't know, you can tell me, really, they're more willing to sort of invest and build that relationship with you. Maybe it's because you seem more active. And then I was placed in my last job by a recruiter, and I just kept up with that person. So I would say, like, how are you doing? Let's, have a virtual coffee, just because, one, I just really liked her and she was nice. And two, it's just, I thought it was a good investment of time, and it's helped me.
Yeah, I think the continuity and consistency and follow-up is key as well, because look, and I'll jump out and say apologies for anyone who may have reached out to my organization and didn't get an immediate callback, but you are manning a lot of incoming calls all the time. I think developing the relationship, referrals are great, to your point, Susan. And then from the initial call, setting up, kind of establishing expectations. If it's every other week, we're just going to check in with one another. And I would make sure I'm definitely doing that, because you're staying top of mind. You never know what's going to come across someone's desk. And to, both of your points, it's, you know what? Susan and I have been connected. Susan would be perfect for this. And you feel comfortable giving Susan a call back because you kind of know her now, versus Billy over here, who's passive. She's probably not going to call me back as fast. So I'm going to call Susan first. It's just the human nature of it and the relationship part of it.
And have you seen LinkedIn being a good tool? Obviously, there's a lot of networking in person, but certainly it seems like LinkedIn, especially during a lot more, has been done connecting over that. Do you guys see that as a good tool as well to really stay on top of?
I know for LinkedIn is a primary recruiting source for us. And so you got to be visible on LinkedIn. And if you're really in a search, you should make that known, because our recruiters all utilize LinkedIn regularly to source for candidates. But I think joining networking groups also makes you more visible. People know people and they share profiles. That's my 2 cents.
Someone in an early career was saying, like, you should be on there liking your posts every day, like stand in line for coffee and scroll through and like 5 things, even if you're not looking, just keeps you in the algorithm. And the other thing, if you're trying to go into a different practice area, start posting about that practice area. Like, some government agency release something, put that out there and say, like, what you think is great about it or not great about it. It helps.
It's all personal branding also, right? And you want to be seen by people who are looking to hire or working with someone who's hiring.
There's some risk too. That's just my own, maybe personal bias of it is you also have to make sure that you're authentic about it. I do think there's some risk to get really cringy on LinkedIn with stuff. That there's that fine line between, but like I said, being authentic and being your authentic self, and just being very online. And I see, when I'm sure as all of you do, when you go on LinkedIn, you see people who post things, and, I tend to engage with them and I follow them, and they've got some really authentic things they're posting, and there are others that you see that are just, you said, just very much online and just are out there just saying stuff. And you so
yeah,
take it easy.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's all about your
brand. Your
brand.
dog on LinkedIn necessarily. I guess it's fine.
Well, you got to be mindful of your own brand, right? So if you're doing that, so your brand doesn't look authentic now. So, but I agree.
Unless you work for a dog company, in which case you probably want to put your dog out there every day.
Yes.
I did work with a career coach multiple times. I thought it was really helpful on several levels, but I would say, I think there's 2 ways to go about it. One, you might want to work with the coach just to develop like EQ or skills you need for your current job. But then you might also want a coach to help you, like a straight shooter that's going to tell you, like, this job is not a good fit for you. We've tried XYZ, like, let's start focusing our attention on finding the next thing. And hey, I don't think that what you applied for is strategic for you. Or if you do this, you're going to be in that. You'll be in that industry for the rest of your life. That's fine if you want that, but if you don't, then maybe you start like thinking about other things. So I just would say, I think it's very helpful. It would just, you should pick wisely. Have a couple of great suggestions if anyone needs it. Just let me know.
It's really, I think it's very important for you to, certainly as you have that opportunity, to have somebody be able to help you that is outside of what you're looking at, because they're going to see things you're not, and they're going to be able to identify what makes the most sense, and be able to give you options that perhaps you're not seeing in front of you. So certainly I think coaches are definitely able to do that. One of the other questions that came up was whether or not you have seen individuals run into more challenges if they seem to have changed jobs a number of times, trying to find that next best opportunity or a better fit for what they're looking for. Are you seeing that as much of as much of a block as it potentially could be or used to be now since COVID, when people do, it seems like people do tend to move around more now. What have you typically seen from that standpoint?
I have a good reason. I mean, the last attorney I hired was in that boat. She had moved, she had taken a job, then she'd gotten an LLM, so she left that job, got her LLM, went and took another job. That she had a good reason why she left that one. She went to another job that she absolutely hated. She was very, very upfront about what she didn't like about it and why she felt like our opportunity was going to be a better one. And so there was a logical progression, and it was definitely one of the questions we had in the second round interview for her was, hey, you've been through 4 jobs in 5 years, and why is that? And then there was a very, very logical, very well thought out reason for it, and that's okay. I don't think it's disqualifying, but be expected that you're going to get the question and that you should have a good answer. Don't be surprised by it, and I think that you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to get the question. I think coming out of the pandemic, to your point, Patricia, there's a little bit of, I see a lot of people who joined startups maybe, and it just wasn't what they thought, and they moved and maybe tried another startup and something happened there. And so you're able, to your point, to explain it. I think it gets tricky if your entire resume is you've moved every year. You really have to, and you've been working for 15 years and that's happened. Again, may not be disqualifying, but that story will need to be told so that the person looking at it isn't writing their own story. And they're going to ask, looking at the resume, explain the movement on the resume. So that would be the only thing I would say. But to, I think the point you're making, I think a movement, at least around the pandemic and following, is much more widely acceptable than had that not happened and you saw a ton of movement before.
Certainly makes sense. Questions coming up about AI and its impact on the job search, limiting or expanding the opportunity at the crossroads of tech and the law. How are you seeing AI have an impact on the legal industry, and then potentially whether or not it may, down the line, limit the number of opportunities that might be available?
I think that actually it's a skill set people are looking for. I have AI experience advising companies about their products and services that are using AI. So I think that's a differentiator. I also recently read something along the lines of someone tried to file a brief that they used an AI service, and that they had made up case law. So there really isn't a replacement. It may make their job easier sometimes. I find it quite effective in writing thank you notes because you can just put in a few things and it gives you a draft. So I think there's some benefits to it, but if you're thinking about skill sets, I think that's a really good skill set to start thinking about, is how can you even just advise in that space if you're worried about it, like maybe taking over something that you're doing. How do you incorporate it into your practice?
Great.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Susan. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think that, we're seeing the use across the board, and it can make things more efficient. And in some cases, eventually, maybe you need less headcount. but I don't foreshadow a replacement of people doing full jobs. To your point, I mean, I used, chat the other day to write a introduction on a presentation I had, but I had to redo it. It just helped me build the framework, but it didn't help me do the job. It's just like, when you have a large matter and you're getting through discovery, it's going to help you with some things, but at some point you need people doing the other piece of it. So, but I think having that experience, to Susan's point, is key. If you got that experience, I'd be interested in seeing your resume, candidly.
Great, I'll send it over.
Okay, thank you. I was going to call you anyway, Susan, so no worries.
So Danielle asked, and it looks like Doug had answered, whether being in a position with a company, if there's an issue with being there for too long, are you finding yourself, maybe it's time for me to move on? And Doug, you said no, but it certainly does depend.
Yeah, I think you have to ask, if that's a question you're asking yourself, if I've been here too long, it's why are you asking that? And so I'll just take my own experience. As I was in the technology manufacturing industry as a COO, and I was asking myself that question: have I been at this company too long after 9 years? And it wasn't that there was any magic thing about being at that company for 9 years. I had a logical progression, but I was asking that question because what was the next step? And I didn't see one. I didn't see where the growth for me was going to be. I wasn't going to move up to CEO. The company wasn't going to sell itself or buy a bunch of other companies. We were kind of what we were. We weren't going to double in size or triple in size again. I was asking that question because I was not getting what I wanted to get out of that role. And so I think that's when you start thinking that, ask yourself why. There isn't any magic. My predecessor in my current role was the GC of Kimball Electronics for 34 years. Our CFO just retired as the CFO for 40 something years. So there's certainly no minimum or maximum time. It's that there's a lot of other things that go into it.
That makes sense. Billy, are you seeing people staying as long at companies now? I mean, is that does it obviously depend? Is it generational or?
Depends, right? But not to date myself here, but it's less often than that I've seen people who kind of have done what I've done, right? I've had, I was practiced for 10 years. I've been where I am for 17. And I'm not going to say that's a good or bad thing. I don't know that that's generational either. People say that. I think post-pandemic, everyone has just about looked at where they are and where they want to go. And if you look at all the movement in the market, we're still seeing that there's a reason why people are doing that, whether it was work-life balance, whether or not they thought about what's important throughout the pandemic, whether it's the job change because we kind of closed the economy, opened up, and everyone's business looked different. And so there's been a lot of movement, which has created all the demand in the market as well, which is a good thing in a number of ways. So I think if I had to answer that question in short, I don't know that you see as many people hanging around for 15, 20 years anymore. Not necessarily a bad thing. It creates a lot of opportunity for people to do other things. And I don't know that it's necessarily generational. What I would say is probably newer generations have a mindset that movement is a good thing, though. Or younger generations. That's what I meant. Yes.
I worked at a company for 16 years. There was 3 wireless carriers. I just posted in there. I left the firm and they announced the day after I told the firm I was leaving that they were merging. And I thought, oh, well, I'll still go in-house and I'll get some good skills. And that was like 16 years and 3 wireless carriers later. So I think, just start developing relationships in your department. And I really liked it because it was always new. And it helps if your company is struggling, because then you have like all these new things you're working on all the time. You don't have time to think about, well, I'm looking for something different.
Well, one last point that I would say, I would never get super comfortable with your job. I think the pandemic taught us, you never know what might happen and why your company may need to reorganize or frankly change or merge or sell. And so you should always be kind of on the top of your game and on top of what we know is your marathon career. And it might require you to make some moves. So as happy as you are in your current role, just stay kind of on top of your game, because if you need to make a shift, you'll be in control of doing that.
So we are getting close to the end of our time here. I just wanted to ask each of you if you could just very quickly give me, what do you feel is the most important thing for in-house counsel to know when you are conducting the job search today? We've had a lot of great information, a lot of great discussion. Doug, do you want to get us started on that to end things up?
The best, I don't know, it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick. I'm trying to think here, I'm thinking through these answers that we've given. I don't know if I had to sum it all up on what to do is just, I think just, I would say take away, the self-reflection of it. Where do you want to go? What do you want your career to look like? How do you, before you get into jumping into applying, before you call Billy, before you do all these things, where do you want to go? What does that picture look like for you, as far out as you can see it, and I think you got to do that first before and then before you start having conversations with your current employer, before you start off on that job search, before you jump, have an idea of where you want it to go, because it can help you get there. I'm speaking from experience.
I'd say you should optimize your resume and make sure you've got the right keywords when you're applying. And that's one stream, but network. I've applied to a million jobs over the last couple of months, and the ones that I'm having a lot of success with are because I have a friend who was able to get me to the right person, or a friend of a friend. So really, you really need to be networking.
And I would just say, be curious, research, educate yourself on the market. To Doug's point, have some flexibility in your approach. You might want to be open to what actually could be a match for you, but could be an amazing opportunity down your journey, and be active. Boost your brand and network.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much today for this great information. Thank you all for joining us and these fantastic questions. Eric, I know, put in the chat the feedback form. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any other career-related topics you might like to hear more about. Also, there are some resources from Robert Half on the landing page, so please certainly feel free to download those as well. Again, we really do appreciate all of you joining us, and we hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much.